circle after 30 years back to Ohio State, and very honored to be here. Thank you for organizing this event, and I'm very happy to be part of it. So, Cao Lao Shi already talked about what is corpus and the different approaches that can be considered in corpus linguistic studies, and also the limitations. My part will be more focused on kind of the empirical aspect, what has been done in published research that we can use as illustrations to see what kind of data can be used for what kind of research. So basically, what kind of information can be gleaned from a corpus? Right? So that if we want to take a very simplistic approach, it's basically frequency, right? Frequency distributions. Now, what can we do with frequency? So I'll talk about several common subfields of linguistics in which corpus data, frequency information, frequency patterns can be of help when we try to tell a story about how language is used. Now, so one large area, semantic pragmatic research. You can look at frequency distribution of different forms in a corpus. And if you want to compare different forms that are related, and you can see the difference in their distribution. And you can also look at frequency distribution of one and the same form across genres for different corpora. Right? This can be of use, especially when we think about register. Some form may be preferred in spoken language, but you won't see it very much in written discourses. And you can also compare two forms, typically presumed synonyms. Right? We know that if you follow Bollinger, who says that there are no true synonyms in language, then you want to find out how they're different. Now, what you do is you can compare or contrast their frequency distributions across genres. You can also look at how a particular form co-occurs with other forms in a corpus. Right? And this can tell you a lot about the meaning of this particular form, because we know that the meaning of a form typically, depends on the company, right, that it has. And then you can also look at contrastive collocation patterns of two forms. Again, typically presumed synonyms, and how these collocate with different other forms. So there are lots of different types of frequency distribution that can be used for semantic and pragmatic analysis. I can give you some examples. Of course, a lot of these, I have done some of the research myself, so I'm more familiar with some of the approaches. Now, this is a recent kind of study that I've done about the 是的 construction. There are lots of proposals about what it means and what it does. But there is very little research on how it is used and what kind of genres you might expect it to occur. So I was curious about the spoken discourse, especially personal narratives versus a very kind of non-personal type of discourse type, procedural discourse, 说明文. So I compared the frequencies of the 是的 construction in a corpus of personal narratives. And of course, how did I do that? I extracted all the copula 是, right, from that discourse, that corpus, and then extract from this sample of shi uses the shi de constructions, tokens of the shi de construction. And on the other hand, I do the same with procedural corpus, and I compare the relative frequency of the shi de construction in these two corpus. Basically, you can see that there is a significant difference. You do see more shi de constructions in the personal narratives. And what does this tell us? Well, there is a proposal that the shi de construction is used to express subjective stance, right? To construct subjectivity or to do judgment, things like that. So then you can kind of connect this kind of frequency information with the semantic or pragmatic aspect of the construction. Another example, this is a more complex frequency research. So I was interested in the what I call apprehensives, compa as a apprehensive, used as some sort of a, polite expression to reduce the force of a statement that is actually very forceful, or that is associated with high certainty. So I can study the collocates of the expression. You can see that the top ones are really those that are highly certain in terms of the modality or the epistemic modality. So that's another example. And you can also look at different forms across genres. This is an example of apprehensives in English, 3 different ones across genres or registers, written versus spoken. And you can see that they're used very differently, actually, even though they seem to be, the same semantically, but pragmatically they're different. So that's another example. And then another type of research that can benefit from compatible because is the cognitive linguistic research. When people talk about prototypes, how do you identify prototypes? And then once you have a category of a construction as a category with subtypes, how do you determine the strength of that category? So that comes to the question of type frequency versus token frequency. This is an example of the Bach construction. We're all very familiar with this construction. And my students and I did, again, a corpus research looking at the different subtypes. And then you see that the top-ranked types, for example, the first 3, they are highly frequent in terms of token frequency, right? And then the rest of the category aren't as prominent. So the token frequencies are low, but the larger category, the Bach construction, has about 17 types, which is a high type frequency, which means that the Bach construction with the different sub-uses makes up a strong schema, right? And then, and because of these high token frequency items, we can identify the locative, directional as the semantic prototype. So that's another example. And then when you look at historical change of different linguistic forms or related forms, you can also use corpus. Basically what you can do is you can look at how the frequency distributions change over time. So this one is a study that I did with the huo as a disjunction connector, or disjunctive marker. And over a historical period, you can see actually there are different huo constructions in the history of the development. But then over time, some frequencies dropped and then eventually disappeared, and others started with low frequency, but then over time grew exponentially later on. So then there is this process of frequency change and how then a construction wins out over time and establishes after a long period of time. So that's another example. But you can also look at frequency distributions in sociolinguistic research, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Professor Chan's study of the Cantonese sentence final particles, right? So this is one of the studies, and so you compare gender difference in the use of two sentence final particles, and here, this is an example that. So it was you used a corpus, but that was transcriptions from a TV show, right? So that's another resource that obviously that constitutes corpus data. Okay. All right. And then we have acquisition research. Right? So using learner corpora, you can compare different proficiency levels and see how students at different proficiency levels perform with regard to certain structures, right? And of course, this is sometimes we consider this as a substitute for longitudinal data. If you do not have time to follow a group of students from when they're zero beginners toward until when they reach the advanced level, you can do sectional study. So you can collect lower level, intermediate, and advanced. So we call that intersectional data. And then you can also compare learner subpopulations, heritage versus non-heritage, for example. So then here, this is a study Zhang Jie and Lu Xiaofei did that was published in Modern Language Journal, and you can see their data collection. This is from 3 groups: lower intermediate level and high intermediate level, and then native speaker as control, right? And so here you can see for each group they collected essays, right? And this is information on the data source, and then you can see their frequency distributions. It's very interesting data here because you can see the study is about numeral classifier uses in the second language learner. And you can see that the number of classifier tokens across the groups, right? And then the classifier types. What you can see is that both the lower and the higher intermediate level users use fewer types than the native speakers, right? But they use more tokens, right? So that is something interesting and it needs to be interpreted. And then you can also see the per 100 character tokens and types, right? So this is an example that you can consider. You don't want to do this kind of sectional research. Okay, so Tao Laoshi mentioned, am I good with time?
Yeah.
About time?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I think I'll just say maybe 2 sentences. Sometimes, we say that frequency data is useful, but it's useful only when you use it properly, right? I mean, we can't really discuss the details of these studies, but I think you could get a sense of, if I want to do this type of research, what kind of frequency you have. So you have these illustrations. And Tao Laoshi mentioned there's a difference between corpus-driven versus corpus-based. Corpus-based, you already have some kind of hypothesis and you want to confirm it or validate it, and then you look for data. To do that, corpus-driven is you don't really quite know what's going on with the data, and you just want to look how the data, the distributions, what kind of story the distributions will tell you or lead you to tell, right? And I did a recent study in internet neologisms. It actually has been accepted by Language in Society. So I'm very happy. The data is kind of hard to see. 绿茶婊, 心机婊. There's like 78 types in this category. And I did a token frequency ranking, and you can see that there are like tokens that are really high frequency. And so 心机婊, 绿茶婊, 女神婊, I don't remember the others. So because this is a new category, you don't know how it behaves. So you look at the token type distributions. And what I learned from the token frequency and type frequency is that these 5 items are very popular. People use them over and over again, and many people use them, obviously, so there's that popularity of these high type foods. On the other hand, there is a large amount of low frequency items. Some are one-off coinages that are very rarely reused. But what this tells us is that there is a schema, this X biao, right? So there are different things that can enter into that slot. And because of the high type frequency, this schema is very strong. And because it's strong, it can readily license new items, right? So this is what I've learned from just basically trying to explore what's going on with these usages. And then it also led me to actually propose an exemplar-based generation of a new category. So how new terms come into being is basically, you have these prototypes and based on similarity or analogy, new items come to existence. I'm not going to say much more about that. I think it's time for Professor Huang to discuss the next part. All right. Thank you.